It was just about 2 weeks ago that we learned that special counsel Robert Mueller has impaneled a grand jury currently investigating Russia's involvement in the presidential election. Now, the move really seemed to shake up Washington. We wanted to know why. What is a grand jury? What kind of power does it have? And does it signal that somebody has done something wrong? We sat down with one of our legal experts to walk us through that process. Joining me right now, Professor Brendan Beery from the Western Michigan University Cooley Law School. Professor, always good to see you.
Great to be here.
Okay, Washington all attended because now we know that a grand jury, and the word is, has been impaneled by Robert Mueller as he investigates whatever went on with Russia. So let's start right at the beginning so people understand what it is and what it isn't. So what is a grand jury?
A grand jury, as the name suggests, is bigger than what's called a petite jury, which is what we see on TV, which is those 6 to 12 people who are deciding a case. A grand jury is a group of, in the federal system, 23 people.
Oh, it's that many?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
They need 16 to operate, to form a quorum, but there's 23 people on the grand jury. And what a grand jury does is, number one, investigate an alleged or potential crime. And number two, and the main function of a grand jury, and this has been widely misunderstood, I think, although the investigatory function is there, the main function of a grand jury is to decide whether to either indict somebody for a crime, that means formally charge them with a crime, or to issue what lawyers call a no bill, which means that they are not persuaded that there's probable cause that a crime has been committed. But that last part is exceedingly rare.
Right, and of course that's the information that has to be presented to them where they say there's enough here that if it went to trial they would likely proceed.
Right.
So who are the people they select? Because this is where there's a little bit of controversy going, because most of these people are selected out of the D.C. district, is that right?
Yeah, and it's very interesting. You know, Bob Mueller here, the special prosecutor, seems to have changed venue. It was widely reported he was already using a grand jury in Virginia.
Yeah.
And now he has switched over to a grand jury in D.C., which means, well, a couple things. Number one, he might be looking at alleged crimes or possible crimes that were committed in the District of Columbia, so he just wants to have a grand jury where he has venue. But there's also this thing lawyers have called forum shopping, where we tend to pick a jury pool that's more favorable to our case.
Right.
And so, you know, that could be very alarming for somebody who's in the Trump administration.
Right, because the D.C. voters went overwhelmingly.
Yes, it
wasn't even close.
Democratic.
I think the 5 people that voted for him in that district or something like that,
right.
It wasn't very many.
Yeah.
So does political affiliation come into play when you have a politically heated up argument that we've got going on right now?
Well, it certainly does not come into play in terms of selecting grand jurors.
Okay,
I mean, those are selected randomly. But in terms of choosing between, you know, a jury, possible jury in Northern Virginia and a possible jury in D.C., you know, there could be some politics in play. But my guess is more that Robert Mueller, because he's a very methodical, very careful prosecutor, that he's looking at very hard data about jury verdicts, and kind of keeping, you know, some of these other factors that are a little more controversial out of it. But he's going to want to try the case where he has the best chance of getting a conviction if he's going to try a case.
Now, in a regular jury selection, we have a pool, maybe 300 or 400 jurors. Is there a pool they select for the grand jury?
Typically, it's 40 people.
Okay,
Typically
but you don't have another side in this yet, so they can't say, I object to that juror, I object to that juror.
No, you can't. It's just a matter of who has the time and who has the ability, rather, you know, than who doesn't.
Right. Now, does this guarantee that somebody committed a crime, or enough that they think that they committed a crime?
No. It certainly guarantees that that Bob Mueller, the special prosecutor, if this reporting is true,
right,
thinks that there's evidence of a crime.
We don't know what kind of crime.
We don't know.
We don't even know the people involved.
That's correct, because it's all secret.
Right.
So we won't know that until the grand jury acts. But you know, any lawyer will tell you if there is a grand jury impaneled in a case, somebody's in trouble.
Now let's talk about fairness, because this is not my phrase, so I can't claim it. I've heard prosecutors say, yeah, you could indict a ham sandwich.
Yes.
Now I'm not trying to make light of this, but you know what it says is that if you stack the cards correctly, with evidence or otherwise, that, you know, it's a very intimidating process.
There's a couple things going on here. Number one, if you are the target of a grand jury investigation, you don't have a right to show up and defend yourself. Even if you are called as a witness, you don't have a right to have your lawyer with you in the grand jury room. You can have a lawyer sitting outside who you can go back and forth and consult with, but you don't have a right to the lawyer with you. Third, the prosecutor, believe it or not, is not under any obligation to present the grand jury with exculpatory evidence, meaning evidence that would tend to show that the target did not commit a crime. So this is a very one-sided affair, and yes, that's why that saying is out there. And you're right, we're a little flippant about it, but it's really quite accurate. A grand jury, the last statistic I saw was that out of 160,000 times that a prosecutor asked for an indictment, a grand jury declined to do that 11 times.
Oh, wow.
So grand juries have a tendency to do whatever.
But the way the process goes, they hand down indictments, and then the real trial begins
That's
after
right.
that.
That's
So there
right.
there is that opportunity for some kind of defense. So are they limited in scope? Because here's another thing you hear about the grand jury. Well, he can go after anything.
Mm-hmm. The grand juries, the scope of their investigation will be limited by the scope of Bob Mueller's authority. And Bob Mueller right now is only authorized to look at things directly arising out of the alleged Russia
So
Trump campaign.
these rumors that we heard, they're looking at Trump's finances, and is that true or not?
They're only looking at those if they're trying to connect somehow Trump or to the Trump family finances to what's going on with the Russia issue. If they're finding some kind of Russian money or Russian financing, and they think that that's quote unquote directly related to whatever happened in the 2016 election. That at this point, that's the only way they could do that without Bob Mueller asking for an expansion of his jurisdiction.
Now, my experience in the broadcast media is about more than 40 years, and I have not heard a whole lot of leaking from grand juries, and I've been around for a lot, so they're really good at keeping things buttoned up.
Right.
Particularly with something like this, unless they've got somebody from the Washington Post who's sitting next door, which everybody kind of wonders if we're going to see leaks coming out of this or not.
Yeah, the only leakers here are going to be the witnesses, because witnesses don't have an obligation to keep that quiet.
Oh, they don't?
No. Bob Mueller will try to convince them that they should be quiet, but they don't. They're not obligated to keep it a secret once they're called and asked for information. So sometimes they leave and start talking.
Trump's attorneys have basically said, didn't say we're happy, but and didn't even say that we're glad. The process is moving forward, and that's what they want. They want a quick resolution to this.
Right. I would too, if I were them, to get this passed. And this is, in that sense, this is a good sign. Frankly, I'm a little bit surprised that we're already looking at a grand jury proceeding in D.C. That means that Bob Mueller is looking ahead, that he does have something in mind, like we talked about, we don't know what. But yeah, there's nothing worse than being in legal limbo and just sitting around wondering if you're the target of some kind of investigation.
So the scenario is going to be, I mean, what do you think the scenario is going to be? And this isn't asking you if you know there's a crime, but what do you think it'll be?
There are two possibilities, and one is a little bit remote. There'll either be indictments or, under some circumstances, and very unusual circumstances, a grand jury can issue a report without indicting anybody, if it's a matter of tremendous public significance. So we might also look for the grand jury to start, putting together some kind of factual report as to what happened here.
Right. And can grand juries say this is close to breaking the law, but they really didn't break the law? Is that kind of what they can do?
Yeah, they're not supposed to be investigating non-crimes, but if in the course of investigating a crime, they find other wrongdoing,
That's a possibility.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
All right, Professor Brendan Beery, I'm sure next week there'll be another legal
There you
term
go.
we can talk about.
That's right.
Always very interesting. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.